We'll jump in, everybody. All right. Well, again, welcome to the National FAIRtax webinar. I'm your host, Mark Maneri, with my colleagues Larry and Elaine. And, you know, one of the things that I love to say about the FAIRtax is that it's simple. And in this presentation, starting with this slide, we're going to show you how the FAIRtax is not only simple, but it's fair and it's transparent, and there's really 7 key inhibitors that our current income tax has that put a drag on our economy, and we are going to systematically remove every single one of those as a result of how the FAIRtax would positively impact our country and its economy. So for starters, we've got a tax code that is so darn convoluted, no two tax accountants could do the same tax return the same way. Like, it's virtually impossible with the number of variations that have been made to our current tax code and climbing. And you know, part of why this is how it is, and it's a discouraging thing to say, but it is reality, is that, quite frankly, Congress wants it that way. And what I mean by that is, when you've got this much complexity in our tax code, it allows Congress to maneuver inside of it and manipulate it, often in a way that allows them to pay for things that American citizens never know about. And it prohibits our ability to hold our elected officials accountable. And the FAIRtax would become a very simple, transparent mechanism by which we, the citizens, we, the people, get to hold our elected officials fiscally accountable. So with that being said, we'll get a little bit deeper into that, but that's a really important point. So let's keep going here. All right, so our current tax code, I told you, 7 inhibitors. So let's identify what they are right now. So convoluted, we saw that. It punishes growth and inspires the wrong behavior. So let's just actually go back to that for a second. If you think about income, and when you tax income, and the more income you make, the more it gets taxed and gets taken from you, what does that do? It has ambitious people say, I've got enough, and it's not worth it for me to grow and expand incrementally, because by the time I'm done paying tax on it, my ROI is greatly diminished. And if you scale that out over thousands or even millions of people and businesses, well, that has a massive impact on restricting our economy. So we're inspiring the wrong behavior by an income tax, whereas when you take the lid off an income tax and you tax consumption, which is what the FAIRtax does, you allow people to grow and expand as much as their brain and their creativity can innovate. And that's just a really good idea. So fundamentally, the FAIRtax allows for freedom of expansion, and that's a really good idea in a capitalistic nation. All right. So lack of transparency, and there's a lot of loopholes right now. We spoke to that a little bit already. Very inefficient. It impedes privacy, and we've got winners and losers, and of course, you know, leading up to April 15th is a kick in the rear, right? Like, you've got to spend all kinds of time with it. And I, for one, am a self-employed business owner, and I can tell you, even if I wasn't in a better financial position with the FAIRtax, and I am, and we all are, and of course we'll show that tonight, I'd say let's do it because of saving the amount of time, energy, and stress and headaches it takes to do taxes. So amen to that. All right. So let's dig in a little bit. So we've got a solution here, people. It's called the Fair Tax Plan. Now look, this is legislation that already exists and has existed for many years and keeps evolving to get better. And it would be well for you to know that when the Fair Tax Plan was created, when the legislation was entered into Congress, that it occurred after $22 million of independent research. So what that looks like is some very dedicated and intelligent citizens, starting with Leo Lindbeck Jr., was a businessman out of Texas. After just being really sick and tired of doing his taxes and having his time being really confiscated by tax implications, he decided to inspire this research. And him and several other business people privately funded $22 million worth of research where they hired and commissioned many of the nation's most brilliant PhD economists that created a tax plan that would be simple, fair, transparent, and revenue neutral and would benefit our economy. And this is what they created. So this is about as nonpartisan as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. And it's interesting that you've got support mostly by Republicans, and we suggest and submit that Democrats would be equally benefit in being quote-unquote for the people by supporting it also. So let's talk through it. Simple. 131 pages double-spaced, right? You can read it. And sometimes, as a close friend and business colleague said to me, when it's simple, it's right, and simple is better. So, look, it doesn't get much simpler than that as it comes to legislation. So that's an easy one. So it supports growth rather than punishes growth. So I already mentioned the fair tax is a consumption tax. You only pay taxes on what you spend, not on what you earn. And all the federal taxes related to income are repealed and then some. So personal income taxes go away, corporate income taxes go away, the capital gains taxes go away, the estate tax, the death tax go away, the alternative minimum tax go away, and there's a couple of others I may be forgetting, but you remove income taxes and you replace it with a consumption tax. And it is simply fully transparent. So there's just one tax, and it is based on consumption on new retail goods and services to the tune of 23%. So it's very, very simple that way. And when we say fully transparent, we mean it. So like, picture this. You go to the store and you go to buy an item that costs, I use designer jeans, you could replace anything with that. You buy a pair of designer jeans for $100. Well, when you cash out, what it will say on your receipt is that the good, the new good, in this case the jeans, were at a retail expense of $77, and the federal national sales tax is $23. And that's just using simple math, right? So, and that's the other important thing to know, or two things to note here, is that it's inclusive, meaning when you go to the store and you see a price tag, the tax is already embedded in it, right? So you don't get to the cash register, have $100 worth of new goods, and then end up paying $123. It's already included. So that's what I mean by inclusive. And the other thing that you see here, it's levied on new goods and services. So it only occurs once at the retail level. So in other words, the fair tax is not levied on business-to-business transaction, and it's also not levied on used goods. So another good way to think about that is, I use the example of real estate, residential real estate. So a home builder purchases thousands of inputs of raw materials that go into building that house. So land, wiring, plumbing, bricks, wood, you name it, right? You go on down the list. When they buy those from other businesses, the fair tax is not levied. They get what's called a credit. When they build that home and they sell it to the consumer for the first time, the fair tax is embedded in it, and the consumer pays that when they buy that new home. The home builder is responsible, the business is responsible for setting aside that 23% and sending it in monthly to who collects it. Now, when that consumer's lived in that home for, let's say, 6 or 7 or 8 years and they're ready to move out and they sell it, the fair tax is not paid ever again on that, however many times it's sold into perpetuity, right? So one time it occurs at the retail level, and that is very, very strategic, because that is, let's call it, the mechanism by which we get revenue neutral and we get to continue and positively impact the economy. If you were to levy it on business-to-business transactions and used goods, you'd start to have some regression occur. But the fair tax is very progressive because as you spend more, you pay more in tax. But income has no bearing on how many taxes that you pay, or how much in taxes that you pay. So now that you have a sense of what it is, let's look at some general benefits of the fair tax on business and trade, and then in our special topic we'll go into a few more details. So, oh, that number's wrong. I edited that, and it's not 120 trillion, it's 20. But there's as much as 20 trillion in global wealth parked in offshore banking centers to shield it from being repatriated by the countries that have income and capital gains taxes. It's estimated that of that 20 trillion, perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 trillion of that are by American citizens. But watch this. When corporate income taxes go away, and the United States now has the lowest effective corporate income tax rate in the world, businesses are going to flock to this country to do business here and within our borders, because they're going to save a lot of money. And if you pay attention to the news and the finance world, you know that is a huge issue right now with something called inversion. And large global international United States-owned corporations are moving their headquarters overseas to countries like Ireland because they have lower effective corporate income tax rates, and they save millions of dollars a year as a result. Well, guess what? When companies come over here to do that in the United States under the fair tax, they're going to build buildings and hire staff. So the economy dramatically expands as a result, and jobs expand as a result. And that's just one reason why. So huge opportunity there. U.S. becomes a corporate headquarter haven. I just spoke of that. And of course, we've got an underground economy estimated at $2 trillion, and they are a large part of the 50% of Americans that actually do not pay taxes. So now, every time anybody within these borders buys something at the retail level, whether it's an illegal immigrant or it's somebody that under the current tax system is skirting the tax system, it doesn't matter. Anytime they go and, whether it's buy groceries, a pair of jeans, a brand new sports car, or a new house, they contribute. So the reason why the fair tax works is because we broaden the base. Everybody pays their fair share, and we'll tell you in a minute why it's really fair even for lower income class Americans. All right. Now, the fair tax is incredibly efficient. So check this out. So the states will likely, we don't know exactly who, but it's likely they're going to collect from businesses. We've already got the infrastructure set up for that. We get 80% more efficient to collect. We go from collecting from 18 million businesses, or we go to collecting from 18 million businesses from 120 million households. That's 80% more efficient. That's smart. There's simply one form to fill out. Very simple. What are your gross receipts, business? Multiply that times 23%. That's how much you owe the government every month. Very, very simple. And the states are incentivized by 0.25% of what they collect in order to form the bodies necessary to police and collect the fair tax. So we've got the infrastructure in place. We get 80% more efficient. It's very simple for businesses. And April 15th is just another joyful spring day here for 300 million Americans, or 120 million heads of household. So very, very efficient and simple to collect. And check out the IRS under our current system. Costs $13 billion. It only collects 75% of the taxes it should. That's inefficient, guys. And so within 3 years, under the fair tax, the way it's written in the legislation, the fair tax would be abolished and be eliminated. All right. Our privacy gets protected because we don't have to fill out very complex income taxes. And what we're doing inside of our businesses and Social Security, it's just, our privacy gets protected. We pay our taxes when we purchase, not filling out our income tax forms. And it's fair. And it's fair because of the prebate. So when we say there's winners and losers right now, think about it. If you can recall almost 4 years ago, when Mitt Romney was the Republican presidential candidate, there was a lot of scuttlebutt around his effective tax rate was less than many middle class or even less Americans. And of course, people use that against him. That's neither here nor there. The point is, wealthy Americans and corporations can hire an army of CPAs on their behalf, and as a result, by finding loopholes, find ways to get around our current tax system and pay less because they have access to money. And that's just, quite frankly, it's unfair. So I get to manipulate the system now because I have the financial wherewithal to do it, whereas somebody less off than me can't do that. In a vacuum, that's just unfair. So the prebate assures that no one pays federal tax up to the poverty level, and that creates real fairness and balances it out here. So here's what the fair tax does. What you're looking at is called the Prebait Schedule. It's two-sided. On the left-hand side, you've got a single adult household. On the right-hand side, a two-adult household. And what you're looking at here is how the poverty level consumption threshold has been determined. So if you look at that number in the middle in yellow, 23,760, and down the line based on the size of your household, those thresholds have been determined. Those are spending or consumption thresholds. And what that means is if you look at the green, a 2-adult household with 2 children, so a household of 4, if they spend or consume $32,000 worth of goods and services, they are operating at that level at poverty, right? So at that level, what the brilliant economists of the fair tax legislators and creators put together in this prebate schedule is that the $32,000 they would have spent would have been taxed times 23% to the tune of $7,369. And if you divide that by the 12 months of the year, the prebate component of this legislation will give back $614 to this family at the beginning of each month, reimbursing them in advance for the spending that they will have, or excuse me, for the taxation that will occur on their spending up to the poverty level that month. So really quickly again, a family of 4, when they spend $32,000, they will have been taxed $7,369 under the fair tax. Divide that number by 12, and every month via direct deposit, $614 will appear in their bank account. And that's how the prebate works. It creates balance by supporting lower income class Americans. Well, sorry, let me take that back. I misspoke. It reimburses every single qualifying household, period, regardless of income. But because it does that, it creates fairness by untaxing people who are only earning up to poverty level limits equal to the amount that they're spending. There. So look, if you have any questions on that, we'll certainly tackle it and unpack it further for you. But the prebate as a point of fairness is a very important part of the legislation that's been built into it. All right. So let's talk about prices. There's some new people on the line with us tonight, and it'd be very easy to think that the fair tax would necessarily mean that all prices are going to automatically increase by 23% because the new national fair tax consumption tax is 23%. And that's not true. So let's break it down a little bit for you. Right now, under our current tax code, we pay income taxes, and business income taxes are always passed off to the consumer and reflected in the price of everything that we pay when we buy something. So actually we're paying a sales tax and an income tax right now. When you remove the income tax, both personal and corporate, you remove what we call the embedded tax, because the compliance costs and the actual taxes represent approximately 22% of all cost in retail goods. That's an average based on all industries. So the cost to hire expensive accountants and CPAs and tax advisors and make tax decisions, et cetera, plus the actual taxes, represents 22% of cost in every good and service right now. It's huge. So when you eliminate corporate and personal income taxes, those compliant and payroll taxes, those costs, that 22%, what we call the embedded tax, go away. So really, really important, right? So what happens is the embedded tax goes out of 22%, and the fair tax of 23% goes in. Now, it's not a wash. There's some complexities that will require businesses to increase their prices perhaps 10 to 15% in the first year. And that is the estimation that we have, 10 to 15%. However, as the economy gets more robust as a result, and there's job growth, and there's more disposable income, which we'll get into in our special topic, and there's expansion and growth, and businesses want to become more competitive, the number one thing they can do to become more competitive is to lower their prices. So across industries over time, the marketplace will demonstrate through competition a decrease in prices, and over time we expect it over several years to revert back to pre-fair tax prices.
Mark?
But no, prices do not go up by 23%.
Yeah, you've got a Java pop up on your screen. There you go.
Thank you, Larry. All right, that's a good place to stop because we are going to tackle our special topic right now, so thank you. That was timely, Larry. So let's move to our special topic, and I'm going to undock my questions here, Larry, and then we'll move through some of these, all right?
Okay, you've got one hand up also.
Okay, great, I see it. All right, Paul asked the question, what is the support in Congress today? And I believe the number is 83. Larry?
You're good on that. 73 plus 1 in the House and 6 plus 1 in the Senate.
Yeah. So, look, we've got a lot of work to do, Paul, but we've got, and Larry, I'd invite you to let me know if I got this one right. I believe we've got more co-sponsors than we've ever had before. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah. So support in Congress is growing, Paul. It's incremental, however, and we need real advocates. So you want to consider that when you're voting this November for elected officials. So that's the kind of support that we're looking at right now. All right. The next question comes from Ed Beard Jr. Ed, thank you for your question. He says this: I am a commercial real estate mortgage banker. I own the company. Will I have to charge, add, collect, or send in the tax for doing a commercial mortgage for a client that needs to purchase or refinance a commercial real estate property? Larry?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, but it is not on the amount to be financed. It is only on the amount of the service that you provide to conduct that transaction. You know better than I, Ed, how much that would actually be, but whatever your service costs would be, you would collect the tax for that amount only. Mark?
Yeah, so not on the amount of the mortgage, obviously. So perhaps, Larry, sometimes a mortgage broker or banker may charge what I believe is known in the industry as an origination cost, which is really a fee for executing the loan. And if I heard you correctly, the 23% would be charged on that fee or any additional fees that he charges. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. However, from what we have seen in the market thus far, at least here locally in the Orlando area, is brokers are offering mortgages, either refinance or new, and there are no origination fees. So they're doing some constructive financing there to work around that. And if you do that with your business, Ed, I think you can avoid having to collect the tax. Mark?
Thank you, Larry. So Josh writes in, is there any study showing how much more or less the income the government will take in from this? And I really appreciate you bringing that up because I forgot to mention it, and I normally do, Josh. And the answer is it's revenue neutral, meaning in the first year it'll bring in the same amount of money that Congress currently raises right now with the income tax, and that was a very important point that the economists who created the fair tax and who did that research went to work with that point in mind. So revenue neutral first year, and then as the economy grows, which we expect it to dramatically, then more and more. Now the fair tax does not address spending, but we believe we can help Congress bring in even more money by growing our economy. Is Trump on board? Asked Daryl, and the answer is no, at least not officially. Larry, do you have an idea of Trump's tax plan?
Yes, he's got a tax plan with 3 tax tiers on it, and some other changes. I don't have the total details. I've not reviewed the entire package that he is proposing, but he is not on board with the fair tax at this point. Mark?
And he hasn't actually come out and said, I'm for it or against it, has he?
No, he has. You're right. He has not said either way.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So another question around how do you stop cheating? What if some companies only report part of their revenues? Well, first of all, I think the number is somewhere around 80%, and Larry, you can interject here if I'm off base, but like the 80% of the retail sales occur through the largest publicly traded companies in the world. You know, the Home Depots, the Targets, the Amazons, etc. And these companies are not going to risk massive fees and jail time to try to cheat a system that is going to put them in a better place, truly. So that's one point. And, you know, the reality is that it becomes much more difficult to cheat the system because we now have 80% less businesses or entities to take a really close look at, i.e. audit, read audit there, that would allow for policing to be very, very strong. So those are a couple of points on it. And Larry, do you have anything stronger that you'd add to that?
Only that from the top down, because the fair tax is going to be monitored or administered and enforced by the states as opposed to the federal government, they are much closer to knowing, to the businesses in their state and to knowing what kind of revenue each of those businesses have been providing, especially if it is one of the 45 states that now have a state sales tax. If the revenue from the fair tax that is being reported is not the proper proportion to what's being reported for the state sales tax, that'll be a flag, and the enforcement department will be able to track that down very rapidly. So most people just won't want to take a chance on losing their license. Mark?
Thank you, Larry. A couple questions on the Prebait here. Larry, people want to know, do they get a check, credit card, And so that's one. And then another question from Frank is, isn't the prebate essentially a one-time cost? You want to handle that?
Sure. I'm not sure how he means it's a one-time cost, because it's a cost every month to the federal government, but it does come out of the 23 cents out of the dollar that's being collected by the sales tax. So it is money that's being turned around so that nobody pays taxes on the essentials of life. What was the first part of that question, Mark? I got here. Isn't the prebate?
How does the prebate come? I did say we believe it's going to come via direct deposit.
Yeah,
It could be a bank card that gets replenished. What do you know about that?
okay, it could be a debit type card that you can get from the government, or it could go into a checking account that you already have, or you can get a check by mail. The Social Security Administration will be dispersing the FAIRtax family consumption allowances, the prebate, and so they will send it out just as they're sending out Social Security checks now. Mark?
Yeah. All right. Marcos asked the question, how will the fair tax affect individual state taxes? And the answer is, Marcos, it does not affect state taxes. It is mutually exclusive from a state tax, whether it's a state sales tax or property tax or income tax. Just like our current federal taxes today, it's separate. So the fair tax, you asked in the second half, would we be getting a 23% tax plus an additional state tax? Not an additional state tax, just the same tax you're already getting, depending on what state you live in. And that being said, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that if the country actually moved from an income tax to a consumption or sales tax, that states that currently do have an income tax may consider and would likely follow suit to eliminate their income tax and go to a sales tax. I live in the state of Florida, and the state of Florida is financially, in one of the better places compared to most states in the union, and there's no income tax, only a state sales tax here. So it's one of the largest, if you will, economies demonstrating that consumption trumps income in this case, or I should say period, not just in this case, but in the case of Florida. I think that handles Marcos.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is that states that have an income tax will be affected by implementation of the fair tax, because right now the state income taxes are generally based off of the 1040 return for the federal income tax system right now. Under the fair tax, there will be no 1040 form because nobody is filing federal income tax returns any longer. And so the states will have to do something to change the way they're getting the collections on their income tax, and we suspect they may decide to comply with the plan of the fair tax and become totally compliant, as it's so much simpler to enforce. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. All right, Larry, let's jump on our special topic and do a little more or demonstrate a little bit more around the impact the fair tax has on jobs and growth, and then we will circle back to any final questions that we've got. You guys have been asking some great questions, so keep them coming. We appreciate you for doing that. All right. So this would have been a better slide coming after our special topic, because we're going to demonstrate even further why it's of such a benefit. But that being said, who wouldn't want this? Like, we looked at 7 big inhibitors the current income tax puts on our economy right now, like a massive drag. And we removed all of them. We've got economic growth and expansion, which we'll dig into a bit more here in a second. We've got simplicity, we've got fairness, we've got privacy, we've got transparency, we've got expansion. Like, it's just smart, right? And it's evolved. It's a very evolved way of funding our government and raising revenue for it. And we could be a real world leader when we do it. So if you look at that, you know, why wouldn't somebody want that? Well, I spoke to it up front. So think about this. 50% of lobbyists are tax lobbyists. Most of those people are hired by wealthy corporations to manipulate the corporate income tax code to benefit that corporation that keeps them on retainer. In fact, a study shows that a corporation hiring a lobbyist and paying them perhaps several $100,000 a year to lobby to change the corporate income tax code returns 6 to 1. So 50% of lobbyists are tax lobbyists that make a very hefty salary, and if the fair tax gets implemented, there's no need for them anymore. So they operate, of course, out of self-interest. Politicians, I already explained that up front. They like complexity because they get to maneuver and push buttons and pull levers around our company's money, our country's money, that we never know about. In other words, raise a little bit here, take away something over there. With the fair tax, you got 23%. It's right on a receipt. We know. So there's real transparency, and it really transfers a lot of power back into the hands of the citizens, and of course politicians don't want that because of greed and self-interest. And then you've got IRS that's going to go away, and some accountants who only work on tax returns, but largely the ones that I've talked to say, boy, if I had more exciting work than tax returns, then, you know, I would go make that my business. So there you go. Some really interesting things to think about there. All right, let's look at impact on jobs and growth. So first thing, you got payroll withholdings will be eliminated, and employees' gross pay will now become their net pay. So let's do some simple math here, people. If you're making $5,000 a month gross right now, and you net, let's just say $3,800, well, under the fair tax, you'll net $5,000. You know, that's a big deal, right? So there's a lot of that somebody can do with that increase in disposable income. I'm just on my calculator here. If you divide the $3,800 take-home pay into the $1,200 additional that they'll get, you're talking about a 31% increase. That's not small. Or you could do it the other way and put it over $5,000, and it's more like a 22%. It doesn't matter. The point is, there's a huge additional disposable income that occurs in mass, and that means that consumption is going to increase dramatically. So think about what's happening here. You've got employees, the vast majority of Americans who are employed realize a huge increase in their take-home pay. Now that's going to be offset some by the increase in prices but they're going to net out more. So that's going to inspire more spending and more investing in savings. But as the spending increases, businesses are going to expand and explode in their sales, and as a result, grow their business. As they grow their business, they're going to hire more people. Unemployment decreases. There's more jobs. And as a result, there's now more money flowing into our economy. So the economy expands at a much higher pace, and interest rates remain low or go lower to expand access to capital, which further inspires this incredible boom that we would go into. So while these are generalities, it's really important and exciting to see the trend that will occur when the fair tax gets implemented, and the positive impact that it'll have on both businesses and individuals. I just want to, before I cut back to questions, I want to see if Larry, if you have anything that you might add to that.
No, you've gone fine so far, Mark.
Yeah. So I'm going to put our final slide up here, and then we'll go back to our questions. We want people to see this. So there's a lot of resources, guys. Go to FAIRtax.org. That is the main website for AFFT, Americans for Fair Taxation, which originally created the legislation. Florida Fair Tax, or flfairtax.com, created their own nonprofit, and they support FAIRtax.org. But you can go there, and it's an incredible resource. All of our webinars are archived there. You can find us on Facebook. FAIRtax Nation is a social media site where there's a lot of conversation happening. Larry, can you talk about FAIRtax Power Radio for a moment?
Sure I can. I was just going back to see if I could find the new websites that they have gone on to. But FAIRtax Power Radio is a web blog radio program conducted by Ron Malero and his partner Bob. Don't recall his last name. I'm sorry. And they do these programs. Sometimes they have interviews with congressmen like Rob Woodall, the sponsor of the Fair Tax, and sometimes with other Fair Tax grassroots leaders. But these programs are recorded and put on their websites, and they are available 24/7. So you can actually get to them at your convenience and sit back and enjoy some listening and some more learning about the Fair Tax. I'm sure they will talk about some issues in a manner a little bit different than the way Mark might have explained it, and it might make more sense to you then. But give it a try and see how you like it. Mark?
Yeah, and thank you, Larry, and you can find that on iTunes by searching for FAIRtax Power Radio, and you'll find it on iTunes, and obviously a lot of people have an iPhone, so there you go. All right, and then Popbox, great website. So Popbox is a website that, in effect, lists all of the legislation across the board that exists in Congress, and you can go and search for the Fair Tax. What is it? House? That's not in front of me, so I don't remember, Larry. Is it the House bill is 25 and 155 in the Senate? Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So you can go and search for that, and then you can vote for it. And it's certainly a way for citizens to know what's happening in Congress and weigh in, and then congressmen and women, they have access to that. And you know, if legislation has massive participation and is getting support or lack of support one way or the other, that has influence. So that's a really valuable resource. All right. Let's go to some more questions here.
And don't forget, you still have a
Larry,
hand. You still have a hand up there, Mark.
I do. Sorry, I got my whole questions undocked here. Oh, Frank.
You got it.
Let's go to Frank. So Frank, we have unmuted you. And if you'd like to speak up and ask a question, you have the floor. Go ahead and do so. Welcome, Frank. Looks like Frank has his question answered.
Yeah, could be.
All right, I got to undock my questions here. So, Larry, Daryl wants to know, and you're going to tell him, how does Daryl convince the average person who only care about sports? A great question, Daryl.
Well, there are none so dumb as those that
how does one who really sees value in this and wants to do something about it get through to the apathetic average citizen?
Well, as I said, there's none so dumb as those that do not want to learn, Daryl. But in fact, Mark did a special topic on this a while back. Maybe we need to do it again, Mark, and that's the 30-second elevator speech. It's just a few lines that you can provide that are those comments that will instill some curiosity in the person you're talking to. Usually you'll start out with some of your friends or relatives, neighbors, and it's simple enough. What I always use, or most frequently, is, hey, do you know about the legislation that's in the House to change our income tax system? And I shut up. Wait and see if they say yes or no. And let them lead the conversation from there. But if they just say, no, I'm not, then you can go on and say, well, it's legislation that literally abolishes the entire income tax system and the IRS, and none of us have to file federal income tax returns again. And all of the revenues are replaced, the same amount of dollars, with a national sales tax. It's the same revenue that they were collecting before, just a different point of collection. And shut up again. Wait and see if they have any questions. If they're really only interested in sports and they're looking at you with glazed eyes, just say some will, some won't, next, and go on to the next person. But you've got to get them thinking with you before you can get them educated, Daryl. Mark?
Yeah, that's great, Larry. Thank you. And Ed writes in, just tell them they will have more money for beer to drink while watching said sports. Thank you, Ed. Larry, so address Hank's concern. Hank has been on our webinar a number of times, and he's a brilliant American, and we thank you, Hank, for being here more than once and furthering the debate. So I suggest in my PowerPoint who would be opposed, and Hank's answer is, quote unquote, I am, along with 25 million middle-class retirees. Hank suggests that his federal tax burden will increase. So, Larry, you being a fellow middle-class retiree, I'd love for you to share your position on that with the audience.
Okay, my position personally is very simple. I know I'm going to be paying more in the way of taxes under the fair tax than I am under the income tax because of the tax deductions I am able to take. But I think the fair tax is what is best for the nation as a whole. And I am hoping to do something that will be beneficial not just to myself now, but even more so to my children and their children. And as we as individuals prosper, the nation prospers, and America can, to quote a famous rich person, become great again. So that's my personal position on that, Hank. As far as your claim about 25 million others, I don't agree with you. I think you might get half that number, but that's only a subjective opinion also, just like yours is, because neither of us, I don't think, have research to back up that claim or to dispute it. That's my position, Mark.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Hank. So Ed wrote in, accountants who may oppose can go get new business from the money that's going to be coming into the country looking for a place to park and get a return. Yeah, that's one thing they could do. The other thing is lending institutions still need to verify people's income. And so likely a new opportunity will be created in the verification of income through a third party. And that will be a big opportunity. And that seems like it could be a good match for tax accountants who only work on tax returns. All right. Ed asks, can we get a copy of the webinar? Absolutely. Just reply to the thank you email that you're going to get automatically, and we will send that to you. Let's see. Yeah, Daryl makes a comment. Redirecting tax dollars back through the states should have the effect similar to the buy local concept, which allows for dollars to be turned over locally many more times than being funneled through the Fed. Got it. Thank you. Larry, what is the FAIRtax.org position regarding the Article 5 convention of the states effort?
Our position is that it is not worth the effort to try and get an Article 5 convention established, because...
Can you explain that for people?
The Article 5 convention, actually, any change to the Constitution is done so under Article 5. One method is for Congress to call or to write legislation to ratify something, regardless of what the issue might be. Another way is for the states, for two-thirds of the states, I think the number is 23 or 28, something like that, 34 states, two-thirds of the states, if they all agree on requesting a Article 5 convention, or a convention under Article 5, it's a convention of the states, for the same topic, the wording of their proposals, their requests to Congress have to be virtually identical. They can force Congress to schedule a convention in which the states will assign representatives to attend, and those representatives will be there for the sole purpose of discussing a single topic. Now, some people want to think you can go in there and have an open convention for multiple topics, but that is really a crazy thing to do, because more than one topic, it's tough enough to get 34 states to agree on a single topic, let alone getting them to agree on more than one. And so the simplest way in a convention of the states ball game is to have a single topic which everybody can agree to, and then the convention attenders, the delegates, will discuss just that issue. So now here's the reason why we don't think it's the way to go. We could possibly get 34 states to agree to a convention to institute the fair tax as opposed to the income tax, repeal the income tax. However, we still have to get at least 4 more states to agree in order to get it ratified. What this really means, bottom line, is that the constituents in these states are going to have to be well educated on the benefits of the fair tax, how it will affect them, the positive way it will affect them, so that they put pressure on their state legislatures to ratify the amendment. Well, that's the purpose of the fair tax in the first place, is to educate people in the states so that we have enough supporters and enough advocates in many congressional districts to let those Congress people in those districts know that if they do not support the fair tax, they're in jeopardy of losing their jobs, losing their seat in Congress. And that's the last thing they want to do. So as long as you have to educate the people to get a convention of the states ratified, we might as well go ahead and educate the people on the fair tax to get the fair tax passed, which calls for also under HJR 16, repeal of the 16th Amendment. And since we've already got the fair tax passed, there's going to be a lot of momentum to get the repeal of the 16th ratified. And there will be a lot of pressure on the state legislatures, and there's a much better chance of that being passed now, being ratified now, than it would be if we just went after the ratification by itself. Mark?
That was comprehensive, Larry. That was good.
Too complex?
No, I mean, it's thorough. You got it. So Stephen wrote in, he commented on the Hank debate, and he says, seniors won't be hurt because they buy less than others. So in other words, their taxes will be lower because they're not buying as much. 2, death tax go away. 3, no tax on pension or dividend income, and no reduction in Social Security payments. And 4, which I'm adding, is they get the prebate. So, you know, maybe Hank has done a real analysis of how much he spends every month and multiplies that times 23% and takes into consideration the prebate, and maybe still comes out slightly on the wrong side of that. But you know, of course I support your position, Larry. We've got to shift this thing for our future because we're going in the wrong direction fast. All right, well, we've done it. I should say, Larry, you've done it because we've answered all the questions. And boy, we want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and we want to say one last thing, two last things. Number 1, you can support us right now by going to FAIRtax.org/1040 and contribute $10.40 a month and have that come out on direct deposit, you know, automatic withdrawal. And that would make a huge difference if everyone did that. So I'm inviting you and encouraging you to do it if this aligns for you. And secondly, if what you heard tonight aligns for you, don't have it be the last thing you do about the fair tax. Get involved. Talk to your neighbors and your club members and your family about it. Find a grassroots club fair tax group in your area and go support and dedicate your time and educate people and bring people to the monthly webinar, 4th Thursday every month. And we need your help because we've got something great here that'll make a huge difference for our country, but it's a grassroots gig. It's the only way it's going to happen. So with that being said, I want to express my thanks to my colleagues Larry and Elaine. You've been wonderful as always, and we certainly appreciate everyone being here and wishing all of you a very safe and fun-filled Memorial Day weekend. So that's it for me, Larry. I'm going to sign off, and I'll hand it over to you if you'd like to say any parting words.
Okay, yes, I would. I would like to speak once more about the Popbox. www.popvox.com. You can go there not just to show your support for HR 25 and S155, but there is tons of legislation in the House that has been submitted for tax reforms, not tax reforms, but tax amendments, amending the 1986 Internal Revenue Code. That is just a lot of garbage. It's Congress wasting their time on issues that would all go away if the fair tax were passed. So you can go on there when you find out about a bill that is a tax reform bill, or you can even search for tax reform or tax bills or internal IRC of 1986, Internal Revenue Code of 1986 on the Popbox website. Use a keyword search and find some of those bills that are purporting some other kind of a change to the existing tax code, and you know, submit your opposition to it and why it's a waste of time and how it won't do anywhere near as much as the fair tax will do, that the fair tax will in fact take care of the issue that this bill is being submitted for, as well as others that you are aware of. So you can be very powerful. And if Mark said it a little bit differently, but when you put in a submission on Popbox, it's not just there for the congressman or the congressman's aides to go and see what's up. It gets delivered to their offices on a daily basis. So they are made well aware of what's going on in the outside world, in the constituent world, because of Popbox. It's a very powerful tool. Take advantage of it. It's easy to use. Thank you very much. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, and more than anything, a safe one. And think about the fair tax, dream about the fair tax, lose sleep over the fair tax, because it's the best chance we have of really turning this country around and solving not just one or two, but several of the issues that are holding back our economy. Good night, everyone. Mark.